During the 2019 Nintendo Treehouse, we finally got to see live gameplay of Pokémon Sword and Shield, and what was originally supposed to be a peak moment for fans of the series became one of the biggest fan backlashes in Pokémon history. And more recently, series producer Junichi Masuda doubled down on the statement that your favorite Pokémon may just not appear in every game anymore. I wouldn't worry about Pikachu though. Pretty sure that little yellow fluff ball will be in everything until time stops. At least as long as Ryan Reynolds has anything to say about it.
I could stop whenever I want. These are just choices. Another round, extra shot, black as night. Thank you, sweetie.
At E3, Masuda dropped the bombshell news.
Previous games that worked with the Pokemon Bank service, you were able to, for example, in Sun and Moon, bring over any Pokemon even if they weren't in the Alola Pokedex. And at Game Freak, we really spent a lot of time thinking about what the best way to move forward was, really preserving the quality of all the different Pokemon, while also, taking into account the battle balance, having so many different Pokemon available, all within, a limited development time, so we don't keep fans waiting too long for every new entry in the series. And after a lot of discussion, we decided to come to kind of a new direction. And so what that means for Pokemon Sword and Shield is that players will be able to transfer their Pokemon from Pokemon Home only if they appear in the Galar region Pokedex.
And with the news that you may not be able to catch your favorite Pokemon in the newest games, or not even being able to see your favorite Pokemon for several generations, fans were understandably upset about this. So Masuda stepped back up to the microphone recently to shed a bit more light on the situation. He said, "Just like you, we are passionate about Pokemon, and each and every one of them is very important to us. After so many years of developing the Pokemon video games, this was a very difficult decision for me. I'd like to make one thing clear. Even if a specific Pokemon is not available in Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield, that does not mean it will not appear in future games." So that's a pretty definitive statement as to what the future of the Pokemon franchise holds. The concept of the National Dex, aka the ability to have every single existing Pokemon in a single game, has been shelved. Game Freak's essentially pulled an anti-Sakurai by saying, not everyone is here. Now there's a lot to unpack here, but arguably the most important question on fans' minds is, if past generations on more limited hardware have been able to keep up with the ever-growing, ever-evolving list of capsulated creatures, why can't the Switch do it? Well, it's obviously not true that the Switch can't handle all 821 Pokemon and counting, because we've got games like The Witcher 3, Doom Eternal, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, as well as Nintendo's own Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey on the console. With those games and literally everything else being ported to the Switch, it is absolutely powerful enough. It's just a matter of being creative with how to fit everything into the Switch's hardware and cartridge size limitations. So why? Why has Game Freak forsaken us? How could they betray our trust like this? The Pokemon series is the highest grossing media franchise of all time. It's bigger than the MCU, Batman, and Harry Potter combined. They have the money to do it, so do it. And that's technically correct.
You are technically correct. The best kind of correct.
The Switch is powerful enough, Nintendo and Pokemon make a ton of money, so what's the issue? Just cram the little buggers in the game and call it a day. Well, as much as it seems like it can solve all of the world's problems, sometimes you just can't throw money at something and have it become fixable. What is that problem exactly? Masuda actually gave us a hint as to what it could be in his statement: preserving the quality within limited development time. So it's the looming threat of our old pal, Captain Crunch.
Crunch! Crunchitize me, Captain!
Including the existing 809 Pokemon while also introducing the new ones from the Galar region, and developing it on still fairly unfamiliar hardware can be an incredibly daunting task, especially for Game Freak's relatively small amount of employees, which totaled 143 as of 2018's last reported numbers. But wait, 143 employees, 800 Pokemon, that's like 5.5 Pokemon per person. That's easy, especially since they're reusing old models. Well, based on the gameplay we've seen, Game Freak isn't using the same models as Let's Go or Sun and Moon. So these are all new. And not everyone working on Sword and Shield is a programmer or 3D modeler or whatever. As they say, it takes a village when making something like a game, movie, or running the best video game journalism channel on YouTube. So how much work does go into making a single Pokemon? Well, we don't have secret spy cams inside Game Freak to see how they do it, but we can take a look at generally how long it takes to implement one character into a game from start to finish and use that as a baseline. During a speech at PAX Prime in 2015, game designer Kim Swift, whose credits include Half-Life 2 Episode 1 and 2, Left 4 Dead 1 and 2, and Star Wars Battlefront 2, talked about how it would take about 2 weeks for a concept artist to make the character design. Effects artists who create things like impact animations would spend an additional additional 2 weeks working on these effects. That's not to mention the character artist, technical animator, combat designer, animator, programmer, voice actor, and audio engineer. Swift said that, on average, one character could take up to 3 months to go from concept to actual in-game asset. Now again, that's not exactly how Game Freak does it, but that gives us an idea of how things work. And that's not exactly the easiest thing to do, especially when you're tasked to do it for over 800 little critters. And that's not even taking into account the balancing of every Pokemon for battles. It's worth mentioning that Pokemon Sword and Shield aren't the only projects that Game Freak are working on either. Earlier this year, Game Freak released Giga Wrecker Alt for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch. And their new IP, Town, is still planned for a 2019 release as well. All this while still working on Pokemon. So, okay, that makes sense as to why there's no national dex at launch, but Masuda's statement makes it seem like they aren't even considering updating Sword and Shield to add it in later. Lots of developers update their games to increase the scope of the worlds and stories they create, so why not Pokemon? They could even charge people for it. It's not like Pokemon hasn't locked stuff behind a paywall before. Generation 3 is a prime example. Even if they were all programmed into Ruby and Sapphire, you can't unlock them unless you have both versions and Fire Red and Leaf Green. Or you could hack them into the game with a Game Shark, but that still costs extra money. More recently, Let's Go did this with Mew being locked inside the Pokeball Plus device, and you cannot get Mew any other way. Catching them all in Pokemon is the original microtransaction. Also, Let's Go only featured Gen 1 Pokemon and their Alolan variants, and that's it. But that doesn't seem to be the direction Game Freak is taking the series. Based on Masuda's statements, we shouldn't expect Pokemon Let's Go or Sword and Shield to have DLC or an update that introduces more Mons to the mix. It appears that each generation from this point on will have a set of Pokemon available, and that's all. So now that we know what to expect, for better or worse, in Pokemon's future, how big will the Galar region's Pokedex actually be? As of now, we don't actually have any idea on just how many Pokemon are in Sword and Shield. It could be 180, it could be 300, it could be 600. We just don't know. What we do know is that the game will include at least 180 Pokemon so far at the time of writing, and that's including Grookey, Scorbunny, and Sobble's unannounced evolutions. But we can glean some information from previous generations and make an educated guess. The most recent mainline game, Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, had a regional dex size of 403 Pokemon, with the original Sun and Moon having 302. Of those, 105 were new to the series. Before that, Pokemon X and Y's Kalos region had a whopping 457 Pokemon in its regional dex, making it the largest regional dex ever. However, X and Y only added 72 new Pokemon, the lowest additions in the series' history. So we should expect around 100 new Pokemon, of which only 10 have been officially announced, and can expect a Galar region dex size of anywhere between 300 and 450 Pokemon. That's still a lot of Pokemon to catch. But all this still doesn't answer the most important question. With a franchise built on catching them all, why change that now? The easiest answer is, it was a business decision. Similar to Animal Crossing's delay. By not having every single Pokemon in Sword and Shield, they won't have to crunch employees and can still release a solid product before the end of fiscal year 2019. Not to mention, Pokemon Sword and Shield has less flexibility, as it was either Animal Crossing or Pokemon that could get delayed, but not both. Not having a top game for the holiday season would hurt the bottom line. So Sword and Shield cut the national dex, and Animal Crossing was delayed until March 20th, 2020. And if they continue with this as their business plan for future Pokemon games, they'll have less work to do and be able to crank out more of the console-selling franchise annually. Let's Go Johto, Diamond and Pearl remakes, Generation 9, all of these become more manageable projects with quicker releases by removing the aspect of having to have every single Pokemon in them. And as we mentioned earlier, having a respectable 400-ish Pokemon to collect is still no simple task for players. In the end, Masuda seems firm that this style of development will be how the Pokemon series continues for the foreseeable future. He took time to address it in the most public form he could to inform longtime fans. He also continues to keep us all updated as development on Sword and Shield continues. This transparency is a nice change of pace from the usual bait and switch tactics we see in the industry. Game Freak told us all what to expect. Not days before release, not the day of release, and never planned on withholding information about it just so they could get your money. Whatever side you fall on in the great Dexit debate, it's refreshing to see developers and publishers being honest with their customers. And hopefully we'll see more companies following suit with how they announce games and features in the future.
But now we have an all-new entrant in the censorship sweepstakes. That's right, it's Nintendo! Famous for its kid-friendly content, Nintendo has its own opinions about what should be allowed in games.
No more Mario nipples, Lawrence?
God, I needed those nipples. Those were so great. Those little brown guys. We waited years to see what's under that shirt. Nobody expected this, but Nintendo's somehow come out against censorship in third-party games.